Torches breathe crimson. Names of the lost still rise. Steps in the silence echo through granite and gold. My heart keeps a cadence older than stories told. Sands of the secret drum call me back to where I'm from. Rhythm in the hieroglyphs speaks in a tongue of fingertips. Under the stars I come, closer, closer to the ancient hum. Every beat I become. Signs of the secret drum.
From a distance, I saw her standing by the stone basin of the temple, where the water lay quiet as if it too were waiting. Neni stood beside it, with her sleeves drawn back, the white linen catching the lamplight. My heart burst with excitement. Neni was not beautiful in the way men of Sharuhin praised beauty, loud and demanding attention and ready to be claimed. Her beauty arrived more slowly, as order arrives, and once seen, it was difficult to forget. She was of medium height, her form slender, but grounded, as if her body knew where it belonged. Her skin held the warmth of the sun without glare, the color of earth touched often by water. Her eyes were dark and steady, not quick to judge, not quick to look away. They held the patience of one accustomed to listening, first to the divine, then to the world. Her face was composed, yet not distant. When she smiled, it was slight, as if meant to preserve balance rather than disturb it. She dressed in simple white linen, finely woven but modest, drawn close at the waist, clean enough to reflect light without calling attention to itself. Around her neck rested the menat, its weight lending her presence a gravity that could be felt even before she spoke. Her voice was, perhaps, what lingered longest. When she sang, it carried steadiness, and when she spoke, her words seemed chosen not for effect, but for truth. Nech, wept Ner, life to you, O pure one of the god. I greeted her with the former greeting to one of her ranks. Standing near her, I felt the desire to still myself, to listen more deeply, to move with the same quiet alignment that her very being seemed to embody. Beside her, I felt my own presence. After greeting, she explained to me that we need to perform Wib, a ritual purification that all the Wabet perform before entering the Per Ankh, the house of life. She showed me how to begin.
The hands first, because they carry the world's weight. Then the face, to cool the heat of striving. Then the mouth, rinsed with care, so that no word would rise unprepared. And finally the feet are washed lightly, because the path itself must be made humble.
I followed her motions as she demonstrated them, careful not to let my gaze linger, yet feeling the nearness of her presence like a quiet warmth at my side. As the water passed over my skin, I felt something loosen. Dust from labor, yes, but also a tightness I had carried without knowing its name. She spoke little, correcting me with a gesture, a nod, a patience that steadied my breath. In that simple act of washing, under her guidance, I sensed that this was not merely cleansing, but an arrival, and that standing there beside her, I was being welcomed into a threshold where devotion and affection learned to keep the same careful measure. The water we shared united our bodies, and the ritual synchronized our heartbeats. The Per Ankh, the house of life, rose before me like a city of stone and light, its pylons carved with hieroglyphs that seemed to breathe under the setting sun. Incense drifted from open doors, curling upward as if the air itself were alive, and the scent of lotus and myrrh made my chest tighten with longing. Inside, the halls were dim and cool, lit by small oil lamps whose flames flickered across walls engraved with sacred language. I had heard of the Per Ankh, the house of life, but to see it was to step into a world both larger and smaller than my imagination. Shelves of papyrus lined the walls, scrolls stacked like waves of wisdom. Alcoves held objects of ritual, ink palettes and reed brushes, and in the center, a quiet sanctity hummed, as if the very air had been taught to listen.
Here is where the walls remember what is spoken to Amun, the Hidden One. I will show you the ways of our mystical way.
She pointed to the walls with reverence. I noticed how her eyes shinned with the light.
You will learn, but you must remember. This path is not for curiosity alone. It is for those who listen with both heart and body, who honor Amen and his creation.
She paused, letting the weight of her words settle over me. I nodded and politely replied with the former reply I often heard people saying to her, "Dek Nech, may you speak life."
Come prepared, Sheshi, and be patient with what you do not yet understand.
When she stepped back, I realized the gift she had offered was not merely knowledge, but a kind of seeing, an opening of the doors of Kemet itself, and I would carry it with me like the breath within all breath until the day we met again. Neni did not begin with words, she began with rhythm. She asked me to stand still beside her, to feel the space before trying to understand it, and she marked the silence with the soft melody she played on a harp, then waited until my breath followed its measure.
Nothing sacred is rushed,
she said gently, lowering the instrument. I learned that the body and the heart must arrive before the mind. She showed me how the temple listened. How footsteps softened near the walls, how voices bowed before rising, how even thoughts learned to move in harmony. Then she led me to the shelves of papyrus, her fingers soft and gentle, yet deliberate as she lifted a scroll, holding it gently as one holds a living thing. Finally, she started to chant a soft hymn before opening the scroll. The hymn rose slowly, her voice steady and clear, and she guided me to repeat after her, shaping the sounds with patience until they no longer felt foreign in my mouth.
May my mouth be pure, may my voice be aligned, may the Hidden One hear what is spoken.
She paused for a moment in silence. Then she started to chant again.
Life to the word, breath to the name, truth to the tongue.
May my mouth be pure, may my voice be aligned, may the Hidden One hear what is spoken. Life to the word, breath to the name, truth to the tongue.
Atum is the knower of the world. Atum is the father of humanity. You and I are not separate from Atum. In our teachings, Atum emerged from Nun by love, not by force. Creation is not an accident. It is an expression of love.
From love? I repeated the words hesitantly in astonishment. To feel the words, "You and I are not separate," narrowed the distance between us, overcoming ranks and status. And everything is not separate from Atum, I quickly asserted, as if I wanted to keep a proper distance from me and the love that was filling my heart. There was a pause of silence. "Can you explain more? Who is Atum?" I asked again, desiring to understand.
Atum is the forever becoming Ankh, spirit of the one being who looked at Nun and saw his reflection. Atum is the cosmic Ankh.
If Atum was complete, why others came after him? She smiled again, this time softer.
All things arise from Nun, remain distinct, and are held together by an underlying harmony. That harmony is Ma'at, truth and justice.
The goddesses of order, I affirmed.
Ma'at is depicted a woman with 2 wings in our sacred writing, because truth and justice are both feminine principles, because they are receptive as mothers to the slightest disharmony that may occur in the world due to the ignorance of some people. Truth and justice are the forces that maintain balance, like the wings of a bird.
She gently corrected me. I wish to live and stay with Ma'at. I wish to know truth and justice. I wish to know the love from which we all came, but I have not so far tasted it. I wished to tell Neni that.
Due to the emergence of Atum, Shu and Tefnut came into being, not as offspring of the flesh, but as Neteru, divine qualities released from the One. Because Amun, the Hidden One, willed his hidden love to be known, he brought forth Shu and Tefnut, air and moisture, space and flow. Space opens its arms to contain the flow. The flow pours itself into space in eternal devotion. They are the sacred mirrors through which the unseen teaches the seen. Without space, no being can stand. Without flow, no life can endure. Space is the expanse of divine majesty, and flow is the stream of divine mercy. Thus, in our sacred script, Shu and Tefnut are the Neteru, the living forces of expansion and grace that sustain the cosmos.
She looked at me then, as if weighing whether to say more.
In the old stories,
She continued,
they say Atum spat or sneezed them into being. People laugh at this now.
I have heard men mock it, I admitted.
They mock because they comprehend only the language of the flesh, but the wise listen to the holy speech, the language of the unwritten scroll that conceals the true meaning of the sacred words. That scroll resides within you, Sheshi. You must read its script not with your eyes, but with your heart. What is a sneeze if not the sudden exhalation of the spirit releasing space? And what is spittle, if not the sacred moisture of the mouth that carries the warmth of the heart? They are not bodily fluids, Sheshi. They are the manifestation of the breath and the word.
I thought of my own life, how tightly it had been held, how little space it had known, how it was unjustly held from freely flowing with the flow of its spirit, the flow of life itself. It took time for the understanding to settle, because it came not through proclamation, but through noticing. I watched how men labored in Kemet, and how, when the day's measure was complete, they returned to their homes with names intact and voices unbroken. But when I labored for my master, it was because he bought me, and when my duty was completed, he still owned me. In Kemet, I saw workers dispute overseers and be heard, saw servants marry and raise children without fear of being torn away, saw records kept not of bodies owned, but of days worked and grain owed. In Sharuhen, a slave was a thing taken. In Kemet, labor was a measured duty he owed for the community he lives in, that he had to answer, and what he fulfilled his duty, he was a free man. The people of Kemet did not call men property. They called them workers, servants, war captives, still humans, still woven into the order of Ma'at, truth and justice. And in that realization, something painful and clarifying rose within me, that my bondage was not inevitable, not sacred, not ordained by any gods, but a wound I carried across borders, one that Kemet itself did not require me to bear. I looked at Neni, and I realized that I am a free man who came from Noon, the realm of infinite possibilities, the realm that is enveloped in love. I realized that she was gazing at me as if she was trying to read my mind.
What about the others? I
In
asked
Kemet,
to break the silence,
Madovo
as I did
and
not feel comfortable
divine
to tell her
speech
about the
was
humiliating
considered
experience
a
of
creative
slavery that
power.
I had been enduring for years.
Sacred texts were not read casually.
The rest of
They were
Holy
activated.
Ennead of Kemet.
The
I
people of
clarified my
Kemet
question.
believed that repeating a line
eyes
affects the
softened.
body and tunes
Let
the
us
heart's
not
rhythm
rush
to the
speaking
divine
about the rest
Ma'at,
of the Holy Ennead
truth
now.
and justice.
It is getting late,
Surrounded
and the first
by ink,
period of sleep
incense,
is about to
stone,
end,
and silence,
and we have duties to
I
tend
felt
to.
both small and
We have
chosen,
to go home.
and more aware than I had
Home.
ever been of her presence
I feel
beside
home
me.
here with you, Neni.
Close enough that I
In
could
Per
feel
Ankh,
the warmth of
the
her
house of
devotion,
life,
her beauty,
like I had
and
never
peace,
felt before.
and the quiet
I
courage
said to
it
myself,
took
but
for her
could
to
not
share
dare
it with
to tell
me.
her that.
The lamps
She
in the
stood
Per
then,
Ankh were
slowly,
few that night,
and I rose
their
with her.
flames held low,
She hesitated,
as if the
just
walls
briefly.
themselves
Then
preferred
she
listening
said,
to seeing.
If you can return tomorrow,
Neni sat across from
we
me
will
on a
speak of
woven
Geb
mat,
and Newt,
papyrus
and why
scrolls
love
resting between us,
sometimes requires
unopened.
distance.
For a long
Her
moment
gaze
she
lingered
said
on
nothing,
mine a moment longer
watching
than
my
necessary,
breath settle,
as if to send me
my
a message
shoulders
that
lower
it is
from the
okay,
habits
we will
of
be
labor.
apart now.
She opened the
I
scroll,
will return,
and I saw
I
the
said.
beautiful, colorful,
I
holy
know.
Aeneid of Egypt,
She replied with
and
a
other
confident
sacred
smile.
script.
When
The
I
gods
returned
of
to my
Kemet,
master's house
I
that
said,
night,
desiring
moving
to show
quietly
I
so as
honor
not to
Kemet's
wake
gods,
the anger that slept lightly
she
there.
smiled.
An elder slave
We
was
do not
waiting by the
have many
doorway,
gods.
his back
The
bent by
Neteru
years
are the
of
divine
carrying
forces
what
of
was never
divine
his.
actions.
He looked
She
at me for a
explained
long
calmly.
moment, not
Before
with
this world
suspicion,
existed,
but with recognition,
before even the
and
first
asked
sound,
softly where I had
there
been.
was noon.
For my eyes no
I
longer carried
frowned
the
slightly.
dullness of exhaustion alone.
Water? I asked.
I hesitated.
That is
then
what people
spoke the
say.
truth, that I had been with
She
Neni,
smiled,
learning
neither
the way of
correcting me
Kemet,
nor agreeing with me.
He listened without interruption.
That is what foreigners
his face
say.
unreadable until,
No,
at last,
noon is not
a
moo,
slow smile
the water you
spread
can
across
drink.
it. The kind that
Noon
comes
is
from
what
having
existed
survived
before
long
water
enough to
could
recognize
exist.
hope when it
It
passes
has
by.
no form, no
Then go.
measure,
He said
no
quietly,
time.
placing a
It
steady
is not
hand on my
emptiness
shoulder.
as you understand it.
Go
It
whenever
is
you are called to
fullness
learn.
without shape,
I will say you
but
were
it can
sent on
take
an errand,
any possible
or
shape.
kept late in the fields, or
In
delayed by the
Sharuhen,
river.
I said
I have
slowly,
lived long enough in
the
Kemet
elders
to
spoke
know
of a
when
darkness
Ma'at opens a
before
door,
creation,
it is not for us
but
to
they
close
feared
it.
it. They called
In
it
his
Yam,
promise, spoken
sea,
without fear
chaotic,
or demand,
violent, and
I
hostile,
felt a protection no
and
wall
Ma'at,
had ever given
death's
me.
devouring,
And
dry,
I understood that even within
annihilating.
bondage, there
They
were
feared
those who
it
still
because they
knew how
thought
to
it was
guard what
absence.
was sacred.
Noon, in our knowledge, is possibilities without limit. For example, empathy is like an inner wave you feel, but it can be expressed in many possible ways. Everything hidden comes as come to us like a wave. Love, creativity, and strength. That is why, in our sacred writing, we use waves to describe noon.
As Neni spoke, I felt something loosen and tighten within me at the same time. The stories I had carried from Sharuhen had always begun with warning, with darkness as a thing to be watched, mastered, or driven away. Even as a child, I had learned to brace myself against what came before and beneath. Here, in the teaching of the people of Kemet, I was being asked to stand without armor before the beginning itself, to investigate what had once frightened me and see not threat, but possibility. The contrast unsettled me. It made my breath shallow, then deep, as if my body were arguing with itself. Yet beneath the unease, there was a quiet relief, like discovering that the weight I had been carrying was not the world, but fear mistaken for wisdom. I did not reject the voices of my elders. I felt them rearrange themselves, finding new places within me. And in that slow reordering, guided by Neni's patient words, I sensed that learning was not a turning away from who I had been, but a widening of the ground on which I could finally stand without fear.
From noon a tomb emerged.
Neni brought me back from Sharuhen to her gentle presence that offered me a world of possibilities. The first God, I said.
The first becoming, brought into being by Heka, the Creator's mouth, and by the Neteru, the forces of the Amun, the Hidden One, the forces of love, joy, justice, truth, and other powers. A tomb means the complete whole one, the gathered one. He is the heir of Heka, the Creator's speech, who is not separate from what come after him. He is the seed that already contained the tree.
I hesitated, then asked, "Is Atum the world?" Neni's gaze held mine, steady and warm.
When I read the pages where my father first saw my mother, I had to close the scroll. It is a strange thing to read of the moment before you existed, to watch the world tilt toward you long before your name was spoken. I had known their love as something solid, like stone or riverbank, steady, unquestioned. But to see it begin, to see it tremble, uncertain, distant, fragile as breath over water, it humbled me. He wrote of her as though she were light learning how to take shape in linen, of how he stood in dust and calluses, while she stood in measure and balance, of how distance felt holy, and of how love began not in speech, but in noticing. I tried to imagine her then, much younger than the mother I know now, not yet lined by grief, not yet shaped by the resistance movement she joined long ago to face the Dina of occupation of Kemet before she gave birth to me. She was a Wabet, a pure one, whose hands still smelled of lotus and ink, and the Meret entrusted with grain and ritual. And him, my father, he was not yet a bearer, not yet a teacher, but a slave with a gaze too steady for his chains. They recognized one another before they understood why. That is what struck me most. He writes that when their eyes met, something in him settled, that her voice, even when speaking of measures and barley, carried more than instruction. And I know my mother. She did not look long without intention. She must have seen in him what others could not merely strength of body, but hunger of soul. She heard his unspoken questions. She knew he was searching for answers. Love, I realize now, did not begin between them as longing. It began as recognition. Two people sensing that the other carried an unfinished sentence. When he described the first time she spoke to him beyond necessity, when she invited him, cautiously, into Per Ankh, the house of life, I felt my throat tighten. That was the moment my mother crossed a boundary more dangerous than affection. And from there, she began to share with him the story of the becoming. I smiled when I read that. Of course she did. My mother never gave love without giving knowledge, and never gave knowledge without testing its vessel. He wrote how she spoke of noon as depth without form, of Atum, the complete one, who emerged from Creator's mouth, from noon. She spoke of separation that allows life to flow. He listened as a man thirsty for origin. I imagine her voice in the dim light of the Per Ankh, papyrus unfurled between them, her finger tracing signs, while he leaned closer, not merely to see, but to understand. I imagine the moment when his questions shifted from curiosity to reverence. And I understand something now that I did not before. Their love grew in the space between cosmology and confession. While she explained how the one made the multiplicity, she was unfolding before him, revealing that unity does not fear closeness. While he learned that the universe began from noon, the unseen waves of possibilities, he was learning that he too could become free from chains, returning to his essence. It was in the story of creation that they began creating me, not in body yet, but in alignment. When he writes that the distance between them narrowed, I felt gratitude rather than sentiment, because that narrowing was not possession. It was courage. She risked reputation. He risked hope. And I, reading their beginning, felt something I had not expected, the tenderness for my father as a young man. He was not always steady, not always wise. There was a time when he did not yet know he would become the keeper of Ma'at in our house. And my mother? She chose him before the world confirmed him. That is the kind of love that shapes history quietly. As I rolled the scroll closed for the night, I pressed my hand to the place where their first glance was written. I realized that I am not merely their daughter. I am the continuation of a gaze held long enough to change two lives. And perhaps, if I am faithful, long enough to change more. The next day, I could not wait to continue reading my father's scrolls, and I picked them as soon as I found quiet time, and I sat on my room, reading my father's words.
In the next episode, Sheshi and Neni started to secretly meet in the sacred library called Per Ankh, or the House of Life, in ancient Egypt. Subscribe to our channel to know what happens next.
Who taught my hands this pattern? Who caught pulse in my blood? Is it the river still singing? Is it the desert in flood? Sands of the secret drum. Call me back to where I'm from. Rhythm in the hieroglyphs. Speaks in a tongue on my fingertips. Under the stars I come, closer, closer to the ancient hum. Every beat I become. Sands of the secret drum.